Mira wiped her hands on her old apron as she stood behind the counter of the small cafe. The cafe was called Starcup, a tiny place hidden inside the InspirationalWords' busiest spaceport. It was not fancy at all, just a few cracked tables, metal chairs, and the smell of old coffee mixed with rain that leaked through the port's high ceiling. But for Mira, it was her second home. She had worked here since she was 16. It was early morning, and the rain outside fell in steady drops, tapping on the windows like a gentle drum. Most people in the cafe were starship crews or tired travelers waiting for delayed flights. Mira moved from table to table, carrying heavy trays and greeting everyone with the same warm smile. Even though her feet hurt and her back ached, she needed this job. Every credit she made helped her pay for her mother's medicine and the tiny room they shared in an old building behind the docking bays. Some days they barely had enough for food, but Mira never showed her worry to the customers. She believed that if she smiled, the world might smile back. When Mira turned to wipe down an empty table near the window, she noticed a man she hadn't seen before. He sat alone at a corner table with a little girl on his lap. The man looked tired. His clothes were clean but worn, his hair slightly messy. The girl, maybe 5 or 6 years old, clutched a small stuffed rabbit to her chest and leaned her head against the man's shoulder. They both looked out the window at the falling rain. Curious, Mira walked over. She put on her best smile. "Good morning," she said softly. "Can I get you anything?" The man looked up at her with kind but sad eyes. He gave her a small smile and shook his head. Mira noticed there was only a glass of water on the table. "We're fine, thank you," he said politely. His voice was calm but heavy, like he carried something heavy inside his heart. Mira glanced at the little girl. The girl's eyes were wide and curious. She held the stuffed rabbit a little tighter and gave Mira a shy smile. "What's your rabbit's name?" Mira asked, trying to make the girl feel comfortable. "Bunny," the girl whispered. "That's a lovely name," Mira said, and the girl giggled quietly. Mira knew the cafe's prices were not high, but for some people, even a cup of coffee was too much. She looked at the man's tired eyes and the girl's thin jacket, which looked too small for the cold morning. "I'll be right back," Mira said. Before the man could say anything, Mira walked to the counter. She reached into her apron pocket and took out a few small coins she had saved for lunch. She looked at them for a moment, then made up her mind. She could skip lunch today. Maybe there would be leftover bread later. She poured 2 cups of fresh coffee, one for the man and one in a smaller cup with more milk for the girl. She added a warm pastry from the display, one that hadn't sold yet but was still fresh. She placed everything on a small tray and carried it back to their table. When she set it down, the man looked up in surprise. "We didn't order this," he said gently. "It's from me," Mira said. "It's cold today. You both look like you could use something warm." The man stared at her as if trying to find the right words. For a moment, he looked like he might refuse, but then the little girl reached for the cup of warm milk. She took a careful sip and smiled. The man's shoulders relaxed. "Thank you," he said, his voice soft but full of feeling. "You didn't have to do that." Mira shrugged and smiled. "It's just coffee and a pastry. Everyone deserves a warm drink on a rainy day." She turned to leave, but the man stopped her. "What's your name?" he asked. "Myra. I'm Aaron, and this is Lonnie." He looked at his daughter with a gentle smile. "Can we pay you back later?" Mira shook her head. "No need. Just take care of her. That's enough." Lonnie looked up at Mira. Her big eyes shone with a kind of happiness that made Mira's heart feel warm, despite the cold outside. She reached out her little hand, and Mira took it for a moment, giving it a light squeeze. Aaron sat back, holding his cup. He took a sip, and Mira saw how his hand stopped shaking slightly. He seemed like a man who had traveled far, carrying more than just bags. Maybe a heavy story that he didn't want to share with strangers. Myra didn't ask questions. She had learned long ago that people had secrets, and sometimes all they needed was someone to treat them kindly, without asking. Why? A few minutes later, the cafe filled up again. A group of Starship engineers came in, laughing and shouting for coffee and sandwiches. Mira moved quickly to take their orders, but every now and then, she glanced at Aaron and Lonnie. They sat together, sharing the pastry. Lonnie giggled as she tore off a small piece for her father. Aaron looked down at her with a tired but grateful smile. It was a quiet, gentle moment in a place where people were always rushing to leave. When Mira passed by their table again to clear empty cups, Aaron looked up at her. He didn't say much, but his eyes spoke for him. He gave her a small nod, a thank you deeper than words. Mira nodded back. She didn't know who Aaron really was, or where he and Lonnie would go after they left the cafe. But in that moment, she felt like maybe, just maybe, a small kindness could change someone's day. Maybe it could even change a life. As the rain kept falling outside, Mira kept working, her heart feeling just a little lighter than before. The rain did not stop all day. It tapped softly on the windows of the Starcup Cafe like a quiet song. Mira kept moving between tables, carrying trays of steaming drinks and fresh bread. She was tired, but every time she looked at Aaron and his daughter, she felt a warm strength in her heart. They stayed in their corner table long after most people left. Lonnie had fallen asleep on Aaron's lap, her head resting on his worn jacket. Her stuffed rabbit was tucked under her chin, keeping her small dreams safe. Mira finished cleaning the last table and looked at the old clock on the wall. Her shift was almost over, but she did not feel like going home yet. Mira poured herself a small cup of tea and walked over to Aaron's table. She did not want to disturb the sleeping child, so she spoke softly. "Would you like more coffee?" she asked. Aaron looked up. There were tired lines on his face, but his eyes were kind. He shook his head. "No, thank you," he said. "You've done too much already." Mira sat down at the empty chair across from him. She held her cup between her hands to warm them. "You look like you've been traveling a long time," Mira said. Aaron gave a small laugh, but it was not a happy sound. He looked down at his daughter's peaceful face. "Too long," he said. "I used to have a ship, a good one. We carried cargo between colonies. Food, supplies, sometimes rare seeds for new farming worlds." Mira listened closely. She did not interrupt. She knew how heavy stories needed room to breathe. One day, a big trade company said I broke a contract. I didn't, but they had money and lawyers. They took my ship. Everything I owned was on that ship. After that, we had nowhere to go. Mira's eyes softened. She understood what it felt like to have life push you down when you least expected it. "Why didn't you stay on one planet?" she asked gently. "I tried," Aaron said. He stroked Lonnie's hair with careful fingers. "But planets are expensive. Work is hard to find when you don't have papers or a place to sleep. Some people help you, but most just turn away." Mira thought of her mother sleeping in their small room behind the docking bay. She thought of the nights she skipped dinner so her mother could eat. She thought of the days she worked 2 shifts in a row and still did not earn enough. But she never lost hope. Maybe that was her only treasure. "You'll find something," she said. "You look like someone who doesn't give up." Aaron smiled at her words. He looked at Mira closely for the first time, as if trying to read the pages of her life. "And you?" he asked. "What's your story?" Mira laughed softly. "Nothing special. I grew up here on this port. My father was a ship mechanic, but he got sick and passed away when I was small. Now it's just me and my mother. She's not well. I work here to pay for her medicine and rent." She did not say how worried she was about next month's rent. She did not say how the doctor's bill kept growing every week. She only smiled because that was all she could do. "You're very brave," Aaron said. Mira shook her head. "No, I'm just trying to keep going." They sat quietly for a moment. Lonnie shifted in her sleep and hugged her rabbit tighter. Outside, the rain hit the glass harder, but inside the cafe it was warm and calm. Aaron looked at the cafe's empty tables. "You don't get many customers at this hour," Mira glanced around. "Sometimes it's busy, sometimes not. This place is old. Many people go to the new cafe near Dock 12. They have robots and fancy lights. But I like it here. It feels more human." Aaron nodded. Sometimes simple places are the best. Mira finished her tea and stood up to wash her cup. She felt like she should say something more, but she didn't know what. So she just asked, "Do you have somewhere to stay tonight?" Aaron hesitated. "We'll find something. There's a waiting hall near Dock 7. They let travelers sleep there sometimes." Mira knew that hall. It was cold and loud. Sometimes it was not safe, but she did not want to embarrass Aaron by saying that. She wanted to help more, but she did not have anything left to give. "I hope tomorrow is better for you both," Mira said. Aaron looked at her with eyes that were brighter than before. Maybe it was hope, or maybe it was just the light above their table. "Thank you, Mira," he said, "for everything." Some people would just look away. Mira gave a small smile. "If we don't help each other, who will?" She wished him good night and went to the back room to get her coat. When she came back, she saw Aaron carefully wrapping Lonnie in his jacket. He stood up slowly so he would not wake her. Mira held the door open for him as he stepped out into the rainy port. He paused for a moment under the cafe's old neon sign. He looked at Mira and gave her a small nod, a thank you without words. Then he walked away into the cold rain, holding his daughter close to his chest. Mira watched them until they disappeared into the crowds and blinking lights of the busy spaceport. She felt a strange feeling in her chest, a mix of sadness and hope. She did not know if she would ever see them again. Maybe they were just passing shadows, like so many people who came and went through Starcup. But tonight, she knew one thing for sure. Her small act of kindness had given someone warmth when they needed it most. And sometimes that was enough to keep a person moving forward. She closed the cafe door behind her and stepped into the rain. It was cold, but Mira's heart was warm. She did not know that her small kindness would soon change everything, not just for Aaron and Lonnie, but for 2 days passed since Myra last saw Aaron and Lonnie. The spaceport was always busy, but Myra's days felt quieter than usual. She kept thinking about the tired father and his small daughter, wondering if they had found a safe place to sleep or a warm meal to share. Each time the cafe door opened, Mira looked up, half hoping to see them again. But they did not come. She tried to push the thought away, telling herself she had done what she could. Still, something about Aaron's tired eyes and Lonnie's shy smile stayed in her mind like a soft echo. It was late evening when Mira finished wiping down the last table. The cafe lights flickered as the old neon sign buzzed softly outside. Rain had stopped, but the air was still cold. She rubbed her hands together to warm them as she stepped out from behind the counter. "Mira, you can go home now," called Suri, the cafe owner, from the kitchen window. Suri was a kind woman with hair turning silver and eyes that missed nothing. She had given Mira this job when Mira was just 16, hungry and scared. Mira always tried to work harder than anyone else to thank her for that chance. "Thank you, Suri," Mira called back. She tied her apron in a neat bundle and placed it on the back hook. As she turned to pick up her bag, she noticed something under the counter. It was a small folded piece of paper. Curious, she bent down and picked it up. Her name was written on it in neat, careful letters. Mira. She unfolded the paper. It was not long, just a line and a few numbers. Dock 14, Bay 7. After closing, there was no name, no explanation. But Mira felt in her bones who had left it. Her heart beat faster. Why would Aaron want to see her again? And why leave a note instead of just walking in? Mira slipped the paper into her pocket and stepped outside into the night. The port never really slept. Even at this late hour, bright lights blinked overhead, and travelers hurried past with rolling bags and sleepy children. Cargo bots beeped as they carried crates to waiting ships. Dock workers called out to each other, their voices echoing in the metal corridors. Mira walked quickly, her bag tight against her side. She passed Dock 12, the new cafe with bright signs and shiny robots that never forgot an order. She wondered if she would ever work in a place like that. Probably not. She liked the old warmth of Starcup too much. Dock 14 was quieter than the others. Not many people liked to dock their ships here. The maintenance was old, the lights flickered, and the cold wind always seemed to sneak in through the cracks. When Myra reached Bay 7, she stopped and looked around. A single cargo freighter sat in the dock. Its paint was chipped, but Mira could tell it had once been a good ship, strong and proud. Now it looked tired, like its owner. The cargo ramp was half open, light spilling out onto the metal floor. Mira took a deep breath and walked up the ramp. Her shoes made soft steps on the metal dot inside. The ship smelled of old oil and warm circuits. She found Aaron sitting on a metal crate near the control panel. Lonnie was asleep again, curled up on a small bunk with her stuffed rabbit. Aaron looked up as Mira stepped in. He smiled, the same quiet, tired smile. "Thank you for coming," he said. Mira crossed her arms, trying not to show how nervous she felt. "Why the secret note? You could have just come to the cafe." Aaron looked at Lonnie, then back at Mira. "I didn't want people to see me there again. Some people ask questions, and not all questions are safe for me and Lonnie." Myra frowned. "Are you in danger?" Aaron shook his head quickly. "Not like that, but I need to be careful. Too many people want something from me." Mira sat down on an empty crate across from him. "I don't understand." Aaron leaned back, looking at the ship's old lights flicker. "I want to tell you the truth, Mira, but I'm not sure if you'll believe me." "Try me," Mira said. Aaron smiled at her courage. He ran a hand through his hair. "I told you I was a cargo pilot." "That's true, but I didn't tell you which cargo or who owned it." Mira waited, her eyes steady. Aaron continued. "My family owned a small fleet, honest trade. Small ships, fair routes. But we also owned something more, a piece of a trade gate between colonies. Big companies didn't like that. They made my family an offer to sell. We said no, so they made life very difficult." Mira listened. It sounded like something out of an old spacer story. They didn't do anything wrong in front of the law. They just made rules that pushed us out. They took my ships. My crew left. Most of them were just trying to survive. So I ran. I kept one ship, this one. And I kept Lonnie safe." Mira's head spun. "So you're rich?" Aaron laughed softly. "Not anymore. On paper, I have nothing. But I know things, where my ships are hidden, where my old crews are waiting. I have friends who still believe we can start again. Honest trade, free from big companies." Mira looked at him, trying to understand where she fit in. "Why tell me this?" Aaron leaned forward. "Because I see something in you. You didn't look away when I needed help. You gave us coffee when you had so little for yourself. People like you, they are hard to find." He pulled something from his pocket, a small metal token with a symbol Mira did not know. He placed it in her hand. "I want to trust you, Mira. I have a plan to take back what's ours, not by fighting, but by gathering people who still believe in honest work. I can't do it alone. I need people like you, people who care." Mira turned the token over in her hand. It was warm from his pocket, but heavy with meaning. "Why me?" she asked, her voice soft. "Because you're kind," Aaron said. "And kindness is the rarest treasure in space." Mira looked at Lonnie, sleeping peacefully on the bunk. She thought of her mother, sleeping alone in their cold room. She thought of the cafe, the rain, the coins in her pocket that were never Enough. She did not know what this would mean. But her small kindness had brought her here, to something bigger than herself. Okay, Mira said finally. Tell me what you need. Aaron smiled, relief and hope shining in his tired eyes. I need you to help me find people like you. People who still believe good work is possible. People who dream. And so, in the quiet belly of an old freighter, something new began. A plan. A promise. And all because a poor waitress bought a stranger a cup of coffee on a rainy day. Mira woke up the next morning before the sun rose over the spaceport. She had barely slept after meeting Aaron on his old freighter. The small metal token he gave her felt heavy in her pocket all night, as if it held secrets too big for her small life. She sat on the edge of her narrow bed, brushing her hair with quick strokes. In the other room, she heard her mother coughing softly in her sleep. Mira tiptoed to the little shelf where she kept her mother's medicine. There was only enough left for 2 days. She sighed and tucked the small bottle back in place. She wished she could tell her mother about Aaron and his plan, about how her kindness had opened a door to something bigger. But she wasn't sure yet. Maybe it was just a dream. Maybe she would wake up tonight and find nothing but cold metal docks and tired customers. After making tea for her mother and checking her pulse, Mira slipped into her worn coat and left for the cafe. The cold port air bit at her cheeks, but she didn't mind. Inside, her mind was busy. How could she help Aaron? She was just a waitress. She didn't know how to lead or plan anything. She didn't know who to trust. As she walked through the port's early crowd, she saw faces she had seen for years. Dockworkers with oil-stained uniforms, small traders pulling carts, tired cleaners sweeping the metal floors. So many people who worked all day but still had empty pockets. Maybe some of them were looking for hope too. The Star Cup Cafe was warm and smelled of fresh bread. Suri was already there, pulling trays of sweet rolls from the oven. You're early again, Suri said with a knowing smile. I couldn't sleep, Mira admitted as she tied on her apron. She started wiping the counter, her eyes drifting to the door every few seconds. Suri raised an eyebrow. You're looking for someone? Mira hesitated, then nodded. A friend. He might come today. Suri chuckled and handed her a fresh roll. Eat, you need strength to wait. Mira bit into the soft bread, the sweet taste calming her nerves a little. She served the first few early customers, mostly tired pilots and traders wanting strong coffee before their next job. She smiled and asked about their journeys, her hands steady but her mind racing. When there was a quiet moment, Mira slipped into the back storage room. She took out Iran's token from her pocket and studied it again under the flickering light bulb. It was simple, a flat, round piece of metal with a star carved in the center and a small wave below it. She traced the symbol with her thumb. What did it mean? Why her? She heard footsteps and quickly hid the token back in her pocket. When she turned, she found Suri leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed. That's not a normal coin, Suri said softly. Mira froze. What do you mean? Suri stepped inside and closed the door behind her. She lowered her voice. I've seen that mark before, when I was young. It's an old trader's sign, used by people who wanted free routes, safe from the big companies. Mira's eyes widened. You know about them? Suri nodded slowly. When I was a girl, my father worked on a small cargo ship. They carried medicine and seeds to new colonies, cheap, honest trade. But the big companies pushed them out. They used to wear that mark, hidden in their pockets, to know who they could trust. Mira felt her heart race. So it was real. Aaron's story was not just old spacer talk. Why didn't you ever tell me? Mira asked. Suri smiled sadly. Because people stopped believing it was possible. The big companies have too much power now. They own the gates, the routes, the ships. A few good traders couldn't fight them. Mira held the token tightly. What if someone tries again? Suri looked at her for a long moment, as if seeing her not as the tired girl wiping tables, but as something more. If someone tries again, they'll need people who don't give up when it gets hard. Mira swallowed the lump in her throat. Would you help? Suri chuckled, her eyes warm but sharp. I'm too old to fly ships or fight big traders. But I can give you names, people I trust. People who still remember what honest trade feels like. Mira's hope flickered like a small flame in her chest. Can you really do that? Suri tapped her temple. I've seen many faces come and go through this cafe. Some are lost. But some are looking for something better. I'll make a list. But Mira. She placed her hand on Mira's shoulder. Be careful. If this dream grows, people with power will try to crush it. Mira nodded, she knew. But when she thought of Aaron's tired eyes, Lonnie's small sleepy smile, and her own mother's cough, she knew she had to try. That night, after her shift, Mira waited by the old supply door at the back of Dock 14. The night air was cold, but the docks were alive with quiet hums and distant voices. She held a folded piece of paper in her hand. Suri's list of names. Aaron appeared out of the shadows, carrying Lonnie on his back. The little girl was awake this time, her small eyes wide with curiosity as she peeked over her father's shoulder. Did you think more about what I said? Aaron asked. Mira held out the paper. I brought you this. Suri, my boss, she knows people, good people. She remembers what your mark means. Aaron unfolded the paper under the dim dock light. A slow smile spread across his face. Lonnie yawned, rubbing her eyes with her tiny fists. You did this in one day? Aaron asked. Mira shrugged. People want to believe again. They're just waiting for someone to ask. Aaron placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Mira, you don't know what you've started. Mira looked at him, then at Lonnie, who was now watching her with sleepy trust. Maybe I don't, Mira said softly, but I know I don't want to stop. Above them, the cold stars blinked through the metal beams of Dock 14. A seed of hope had been planted in the heart of a tired port, born from a single cup of coffee and a girl who refused to look away. The next few days felt different for Mira. She still wiped tables and poured coffee at the Star Cup Cafe, but her mind was full of secret plans and quiet promises. Each night after closing, she met Aaron at Dock 14. Sometimes Lonnie slept curled up under an old blanket on a crate, dreaming without fear. Other times she sat close to Mira and asked small questions about the cafe or the stars. Mira liked those moments. They made the cold metal dock feel less lonely. One night, Mira brought a small bag of fresh bread and dried fruit from the cafe. She handed it to Aaron and Lonnie as they sat together inside the freighter. The old ship smelled of warm circuits and old memories. You didn't have to bring this, Aaron said. Surprised. Mira smiled as Lonnie bit into a piece of sweet bread. Suri always bakes extra. She says hope works best on a full stomach. Aaron chuckled at that. He opened a small metal box and spread out some old data pads on the crate between them. The screens flickered, showing lists of names and old route maps. Some files were broken, lines of static running through them. Others looked like they hadn't been touched in years. These are what's left of my father's trade records, Aaron explained. Routes, small safe ports, trusted crews. Some might still be out there. We need to find them. People who remember the old ways. Mira leaned closer. The maps looked like puzzles waiting for someone to fit them together. Where do we start? She asked. Aaron tapped the name near the top of the list. His name is Jorn. He used to run fuel shipments between the outer colonies. He's honest, careful, and he knows the small ports. If he joins us, others will trust him too. Mira read the note beside Jorn's name. Works alone now, small repair shop near Dock 3. Let's talk to him, Mira said. The next morning, after her cafe shift, Mira found herself standing at the edge of Dock 3. The repair shop was squeezed between an old parts stall and a cargo storage unit. The sign above the door blinked with half-broken lights. Jorn's Repairs, no questions, just fixes. Inside, the shop smelled of oil and warm metal. Tools hung neatly on the walls, and spare parts were stacked in careful rows. A man with broad shoulders and hair turning gray sat at a workbench, tightening bolts on a small engine core. He wore a faded blue jacket with oil stains on the sleeves. When the doorbell chimed, Jorn looked up, eyes sharp but not unkind. "Help you?" he asked. Mira stepped forward, her palms sweating inside her coat pockets. "Are you Jorn?" "That's what the sign says," Jorn said, setting down his wrench. "What do you need fixed?" Mira glanced at Aaron, who stood behind her holding Lonnie's hand. Lonnie peeked at the old engines with wide, curious eyes. "It's not a machine," Mira said. "It's bigger." Jorn raised an eyebrow. "Bigger?" Aaron stepped forward and placed the small metal token on the workbench, the old trader's mark. The soft light above flickered against its surface. Jorn stared at it for a long moment. Then he leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "Where did you get that?" he asked, his voice low. Aaron spoke calmly. "My name is Aaron. My family ran cargo ships on the old trade gates. We lost everything to the big companies. Now I'm trying to build again, honest routes, safe for small traders. Free trade, like it used to be." Jorn picked up the token and turned it between his fingers. For a moment, Mira thought he might throw it aside. But instead, he placed it back on the table, careful and slow. "My father carried one of these in his jacket pocket," Jorn said softly. "Said it meant we belonged to something better, something real." Mira's heart skipped. "Do you believe it can come back?" Jorn looked at her, then at Lonnie, who now sat on an old crate swinging her legs. "Maybe," Jorn said. "But talking about old dreams won't fix broken engines. And it won't stop the big companies." Aaron nodded. "We're not asking for dreams, we're asking for work. Honest work and safe paths for people like you." Jorn studied them for a long moment. Finally, he stood up and wiped his hands on a rag. "I still have my old ship," he said. "She's small but fast. Good for small cargo, I'll help. But if you're lying, if you're just trying to sell hope for money, I'm out." Aaron held out his hand. "No lies, just good work." Jorn shook his hand, strong and steady. That night, back on the freighter, Mira helped Aaron and Jorn spread out the old maps again. Lonnie lay nearby on a folded blanket, humming softly to herself. Her small voice made the cold ship feel warm. "This route here," Jorn said, tapping a point on the map. "There's an old refuel station near the asteroid belt. Not many ships stop there anymore, but the owner's good people. If they hear we're moving honest cargo, they'll help." Aaron smiled at Mira. "See? We have a start." Mira looked at the glowing dots on the old map. One by one, they felt like tiny stars lighting up in the darkness. "Who's next?" she asked. Aaron leaned back. "Next we find Mara, she runs a food stall on Dock 6. She used to manage supply runs to farming colonies. If she joins, she can feed our crews and keep the small station stocked." Mira felt a thrill of hope. She thought of Suri, baking warm bread for workers who could barely pay. She thought of her mother, who always said, "Small kindness keeps people alive longer than big words." Maybe this was how it started, not with big fights, but with small kindness, shared again and again. Before they packed up for the night, Jorn handed Mira a small toolkit. "You'll need this," he said. Mira looked at him, puzzled. "I'm not an engineer," Jorn grinned. "Not yet. But a good trader knows her ship. You want to help? Learn to fix things when they break." She held the toolkit close. It felt heavier than gold. Outside, the night was cold again. But this time, the metal docks didn't feel so empty. They were a bridge, carrying secrets, stories, and now hope. The next few weeks passed in quiet steps and careful whispers. Mira still worked long shifts at the Star Cup Cafe, but every night, when the last cup was washed and the chairs were stacked, she hurried to Dock 14. There, under the hum of old lights, the small group gathered: Aaron, Lonnie, Jorn, and now a few more faces. One of those new faces was Mara. Mira met her 2 days after Jorn joined. Mara ran a bright little food stall on Dock 6. She sold hot soups and fresh rolls to dock workers and travelers with tired eyes and empty pockets. People said her soup could warm a frozen heart. Mira first spoke to Mara during her cafe break. She stood by the food stall, feeling shy as the older woman ladled soup for a line of hungry workers. "You want a bowl?" Mara asked kindly when she noticed Mira waiting. Mira nodded and held out a few coins. Mara waved them away. "You work at the Star Cup, don't you? Suri's girl?" "Yes, I'm Mira." She held the warm bowl in her cold hands. "Can I talk to you for a moment? It's about something important." Mara's eyes twinkled. "Important? I like important things." She called out to a helper to mind the stall and led Mira to a small bench behind the stand. Mira told her about Aaron, about the token, about Jorn. She spoke quietly, afraid someone might overhear. Mara listened without a word, her eyes soft but sharp. When Mira finished, Mara leaned back and crossed her arms. "I fed crews like that once. Long ago, when my husband was alive. He worked small supply runs, kept colonies fed when the big traders forgot them." Mira bit her lip. "Will you help us?" Mara looked at her, then smiled. "If you promise me one thing, I will." "What?" "Never let the hungry go hungry when you can help it," Mara said. "Not on your ship, not on your docks, not in your cafes. Promise?" "I promise," Mira said without a second thought. Mara laughed softly. "Good girl. Now take this soup to your friends. They'll need it tonight." That evening, Mira carried a pot of Mara's soup to Dock 14. The freighter felt alive as she stepped in. The hum of the old ship mixed with quiet voices and soft laughter. Aaron and Jorn were bent over old maps again, arguing gently about the best safe routes. Lonnie sat near the crate that served as their meeting table, humming a tune while she drew little stars on a scrap of paper. Mira ladled soup into small metal cups and passed them around. Mara came in shortly after, carrying a bag of fresh bread. She winked at Mira as she set the bag down. "A trader's crew works better on a full stomach." Jorn gave a gruff laugh. "A trader's crew just wants free food." Mara swatted his shoulder lightly. "Hush, old man. You still owe me 3 meals from 20 years ago." They ate together, voices low but warm. Mira watched Aaron's face soften as he listened to Mara and Jorn share old stories, tales of hidden ports and kind dock masters, secret signals scratched on old doors to tell travelers where they were safe. After they finished eating, Aaron pulled a small metal box from his bag. Inside were small tokens, each marked with the star and wave symbol. "One for each of us," he said, passing them around. "So we know who we are." When Mira took hers, she felt the weight settle deep in her palm. It was the same symbol she had carried since the first night Aaron gave it to her. But this time she didn't feel alone. Late that night, after the others left, Mira stayed back to help Aaron tidy up the small meeting space. Lonnie was asleep again, curled up under a blanket on a crate. "You've done so much," Aaron said, handing Mira a small box of leftover bread to take home. "You didn't have to do all this." Mira shook her head. "I did. I have to. If we don't, who will?" Aaron looked at her, his eyes tired but bright. "You remind me of my wife. She never stopped believing we could do good, even when we lost everything." Mira felt a lump in her throat. "What happened to her?" Aaron's gaze fell to Lonnie. "She got sick. The company my father worked for cut our pay and medicine. We lost her because we couldn't afford treatment in time." Mira felt tears press at the corners of her eyes. She thought of her mother at home, coughing softly in her sleep. She thought of all the people who worked so hard but still struggled. "I'm so sorry, Aaron." Aaron placed a hand on her shoulder. "Don't be. If she were here, she'd be proud of this of you." The next day, Mira slipped the new token into her apron pocket as she worked at the cafe. She felt stronger with it there, like a secret badge of courage. When she handed coffee to tired pilots, she wondered which ones were waiting for someone to give them hope. Suri noticed the way Myra's eyes kept drifting to the door. She leaned close and whispered, "You look like you're expecting the whole port to walk in." Mira laughed softly. "Maybe I am." Suri patted her arm. "Sometimes one cup at a time is how you change the world." By the end of the week, Aaron's small freighter had new supplies, extra food from Mara, tools from Jorn's shop, and lists of small safe stops. Each safe stop meant another place for traders to rest, refuel, and trade without fear. One evening, a young mechanic named Finn joined them. He was quiet, shy, and smelled of engine oil. But his hands could fix any ship that limped into Dock 14. Finn spoke little but worked hard, helping Jorn repair the old freighter's engines. He slept on an old blanket next to Lonnie and woke before dawn to tighten bolts and clean filters. One night, as Mira stood alone on the dock, watching the stars above the spaceport roof, she felt something warm in her chest. For the first time in her life, the endless dark above didn't feel empty. It felt like a promise that small people could do big things, if they stayed kind, stayed honest, and stayed together. And it all started because a poor waitress gave a stranger a cup of coffee and found a family waiting in the stars. The morning sun peeked over the tall metal structures of the spaceport, casting long golden beams across the bustling docks. Mira stood near the entrance of the Star Cup Cafe, watching as small groups of people hurried past. Her heart beat faster than usual. Today was the day. Aaron's freighter, once old and worn, now gleamed softly under the sun. With Jorn's repairs, Finn's careful work, and Mara's constant support, the ship looked ready to fly again. The little crew had grown from just a few friends to a small family, bound not by blood, but by hope. Mira held the small metal token in her hand, feeling its cool weight. It was more than a symbol now. It was a promise of new beginnings and honest paths. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Aaron approaching, Lonnie holding tightly to his hand. Aaron's eyes were calm, but Mira could see the hope shining quietly in them. "Are you ready?" he asked. Mira smiled. "I think so. But I'm nervous." Aaron nodded. "That's good. It means you care." Together, they walked toward the freighter, where Jorn was finishing the final checks, and Finn was loading the last crates of supplies. Mara stood nearby, her hands busy packing fresh food and warm blankets. "Everything looks perfect," Jorn said, wiping his hands on his jacket. "We're ready to take back the routes that were lost." The crew gathered near the ramp. Mira looked around at each face, faces tired from hard work but shining with determination. "Today, we begin something new," Aaron said softly. "We start not just a journey through space, but a journey toward a better future. For small traders, for families, for all who believe in honest work." Mira's eyes met those of the crew. She felt warmth spread through her chest, a quiet strength growing inside her. As the freighter slowly lifted off, Mira stood at the observation window, watching the spaceport shrink below. The bright city lights gave way to dark stretches of stars. Lonnie sat on Aaron's lap, her small fingers tracing the shapes of the stars on the glass. Mira smiled, thinking how much this journey meant to her. To all of them, outside, the stars waited like silent friends, ready to guide them. Days passed as the freighter moved quietly from port to port, following the old secret routes. At each stop, they found small communities, farmers, traders, and families who had long felt forgotten by the powerful companies. With Mara's help, they brought fresh food and medicine. Jorn and Finn fixed broken machines and ships. Aaron spoke softly with old friends, opening doors once closed at every port. Mira's small acts, a smile, a shared meal, a listening ear brought light into tired lives. One evening, at a small colony under a purple sky, a group of children gathered around Mira. They had heard stories about the freighter that flew not just for profit, but for kindness. Mira knelt down and handed them small tokens, simple metal discs with the star and wave symbol. The children's eyes sparkled as they held the tokens close. "This is for you," Mira said, "so you can remember that hope travels even in the darkest places." Weeks later, the freighter returned to the spaceport. But it was no longer the lonely dock where Mira first met Aaron. Word had spread quietly. A small group of traders was building something new, something honest. People came to the Starcup Cafe, looking for the crew who dared to dream. They brought stories, offers to help, and smiles that had been missing for too long. Suri hugged Mira tightly. "You've done what many thought impossible." Mira shook her head. "We all did this, one small step at a time." Aaron approached, holding Lonnie in his arms. "It's just the beginning." Mira looked up at the stars, feeling the cool night air brush her face. "Yes," she whispered, "a new dawn." In the years that followed, the small freighter grew into a fleet of ships. Traders, farmers, and families from forgotten colonies joined the cause. Together, they created safe paths through space, routes where kindness and honesty were the real currency. Mira became a leader, not because she wanted to be, but because she cared. She taught new traders how to fix ships, how to listen, and how to believe. And every time she looked at the small metal token, she remembered that everything started with a simple